Welcome, my name is Nicholas Pisciotta. I'm the Aerospace Lead here at Applied Intuition, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Applied's new webinar series. During this series, we're going to have senior leaders throughout both the government and industry engaged in thought-provoking conversations at the intersection of industry and national security with respect to autonomy. It's my pleasure today to welcome our first guest for this series, Lieutenant Colonel Bryan Ralston, who's the Autonomy Prime Lead at AFWERX Prime. Bryan, it's a pleasure to have you here, pleasure to see you again. I was hoping you might be able to give a quick intro on you, your background, and what you're doing over at Autonomy Prime.
Sure. Bryan Ralston, Lieutenant Colonel, active duty. I've been active duty for about 15 years now as a flight test engineer and acquisition officer, spanning all sorts of different jobs. Spent the last 7 years really focusing on test and prototyping and experimentation of emerging technologies. So I'm really excited to be in AFWERX because that's the space we operate in the emerging tech sector, partnering with small businesses to accelerate dual-use technologies. Currently, as my role as the AFWERX Autonomy Prime Lead, as you mentioned, I focus on the entire autonomy portfolio in AFWERX Prime and look at bringing in some of those emerging technologies through our portfolio.
Great, yeah, so as we both know, Frank Kendall's operational imperatives have been kind of the guiding light for how the Air Force is organizing their approach to new capabilities. And for those of our listeners who might not know what the operational imperatives are, the Secretary of the Air Force, Frank Kendall, outlined 7 operational imperatives or capabilities that would be required for the Air Force to be competitive against a near-peer adversary. So I think there are 2 really that stick out, 2 OIs that stick out, both moving target engagement and NGAD family of systems. Hoping that we could walk through those 2, what the role of autonomy has within those 2 OIs, what the OIs really mean to the Air Force, and what elements of those capabilities are really important to develop.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Secretary Kendall really set his vision and his priorities through the OIs and has instilled a sense of urgency in the force to think differently, how to think about how to bring new technologies, new ways of thinking, and able to respond to that pacing threat in China, right? And as we shift the focus from a counterinsurgency mission focus to great power competition, the OIs are critical in that space. AFWERX is no different than the Air Force as a whole, and as we use those OIs kind of as our guiding North Star, making sure all of our activities and the big bets we take in Prime are aligned to those OIs, and so that we can have game-changing technologies and deliver those to the force. Specifically, you mentioned moving target engagement and NGAD. I'll just kind of step through those. The moving target engagement OI specifically talks about, there's going to be a large number of targets. We recognize that mass is a driving factor in the character of war. And Vin Clausewitz, mentioned that, right, way back in the 1800s. It's no different today, and as we looked at moving target engagement, we recognize that there'll be an overwhelming sense of targets we'll have to track. So that's a perfect opportunity to bring in autonomy, right? So imagine hypothetically if we had a system of small UASs as distributed sensing node, right? Using autonomy on those small UASs to coordinate, as a swarm technology and bring in those target data back. But that's still a ton amount of data for a human to process. So you need autonomy for that too, to fuse those sensors systems together and aid human decision making so we can maintain custody of the target to make sure we're prioritizing and prosecuting those targets if we have to, right? And it's all that autonomy aiding in the human decision cycles. As we transition over to the NGAD family of systems, I think this is a perfect, pretty obvious use case of autonomy. Underneath that family of systems is a collaborative combat aircraft I'm sure everyone's heard of, right? Is a uncrewed aircraft that's supposed to be partnered with a crewed platform that is really going to give us a new way to think about air dominance in a new technological area, right? So clearly it's going to have autonomy built in. I think the key with that OI is that we need to have the ability to have a building block approach, right? We need to start small, and we need to have the capability and infrastructure to iteratively develop tests, right? So we can increase our speed to the ramp of technologies so that we can induce early learning and fielding of those capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible, amazing time to be in the aerospace and defense industry. I mean, we had not just with these OIs, but the work that AFRL has been doing, that the Air Force has been doing over the last 4 or 5 years, has really ramped up and changed the paradigm with the way that the Air Force is intending to compete on this national stage. So with the role of autonomy in the OIs, hoping that we can talk a little bit more about who in the Air Force is helping to build out that capability.
Yeah, so you mentioned most of the stakeholders already. Like AFWERX is a huge stakeholder there. The CCA programs and the program of record is looking at autonomy as well. You got folks like AFWERX, which is part of AFWERX, right? Still looking at autonomy and bringing in some of those non-traditionals. You have folks across the OSD and other services that are really focused on identifying the gaps and continuing to ensure that we have a competitive advantage against our adversaries.
It's been, I'm sure, quite a culture shift too. You had mentioned the switch out of coin and then towards near peer competition. I mean, it's been a massive pull for the Pentagon shifting. What has that been like in AFRL as we've retooled? Greater, aerospace and defense industry has been retooling, especially in the shadow of some of the ongoing conflicts.
Yeah, so I think the OIs are a great opportunity to really focus our efforts and drive us towards changing kind of the way we think about acquisitions and think about the way we fight. Right? So it's been really exciting, at least from my perspective, to have a new, fresh look about bringing new solutions into old problem sets that we, have had over decades long. But using those OIs because kind of the driving factor that we have. Right?
So with that, I guess and the OIs have only been out for a limited amount of time, but how are we doing as a national defense base, in the Air Force particularly? Have we met the challenge yet? Have we developed those capabilities? Is there still a long way to go? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think you can't expect change overnight, and a bureaucracy is as large as the Department of Defense. I think we all would love to just have a light switch so we can turn on and be like, okay, we're going to change today, right? And tomorrow we're going to wake up and everything's going to be different. It's just not the reality, right? And so I think you're seeing a lot of steps in the right direction, though, and we're moving towards a way. We have a path forward. It's going to be an experimentation process. We talk about innovation. You need to set a vision. You got to do short, low-risk experiments and get feedback loop, and then put that back into your solution, right, and it can press on. So I think the OIs are a perfect example of that. We set that vision out back in 21. Secretary Kendall put out those OIs, and then we have driven towards that. The staff has aligned. Have OI enabling teams and recognize that, hey, let's set up our vision forward and take our orders and move out.
It's been really cool to see over the last couple of years the parallel track that the Air Force has had, and then same AFRL, and kind of the birth of AFWERX as a whole, and then into first Agility Prime and now Autonomy Prime, really in the full process of looking at how to de-risk new technology and helping to get that into the department. So I was hoping you could pull the thread a little bit on Autonomy Prime's specific mission set, now in the context of the OIs and the greater Air Force. What is the role of Autonomy Prime?
Yeah, so I'll step back actually and kind of talk about the broader role of AFWERX in enabling those OIs. So as AFWERX, we have three core mission areas. We have the Spark division, the Ventures division, and Prime. Those are the core main mission areas. Spark really focuses on using airmen and guardians and to spark ingenuity and bring in those really grassroots solutions to answer the operational problem sets. They also hold the Spark Collider events, which we had our first in-person one just 2 weeks ago at Fed Supernova, right? Focused around resilient basing, specific OI. And that was an opportunity to have government stakeholders, small businesses, and entrepreneurs all in the same area going after a specific problem, really harnessing that American ingenuity that we have as an ecosystem. The Ventures division, runs our Cyber Sitter portfolio, also the Open Topic, the Specific Topic, and the StratFi TAC-Fi programs. That's an opportunity to have really as an open front door to industry to bring us their problem sets, the solutions into the government. For those listening, check out our website and social media for updates on those open topics, specific topics, and StratFi TAC-Fi programs. Those are all on the cusp of being released, so make sure you stay tuned to that. And we have the Prime division, which I sit in, really focusing on harnessing emerging technologies and accelerating those through technical, financial, and regulatory risk reduction. So under Autonomy Prime, we recognize that autonomy was cross-cutting across multiple mission areas. and that there was a huge amount of industry investment and industry capability out there to answer some of our problem sets. So we took kind of the lessons learned from Agility Prime under the technical, regulatory, and financial risk reduction kind of construct, and brought that into the autonomy, to a mission area that the Air Force cares about, which is autonomy.
Yeah, very clearly.
Very clearly. So under Autonomy Prime, several lines of effort specifically focused under, we recognize that testing autonomy is going to be a huge, huge endeavor that's going to be bandwidth limited by the platforms we have or are on the cusp of having, right? I mentioned at the beginning that really the key to having a CCA at the scales that we're talking about, thousands of this order of a magnitude, I think Secretary Kendall mentioned, we're going to need the capability to iteratively develop and experiment with the tech that we're bringing on these platforms. Right now, we are going to be bandwidth limited. So we're working with the 96 test wing down at Eglin Air Force Base, and also the Air Force Chief AI and Data Office, the CDAO, to stand up an autonomy proving ground that is going to be an opportunity to test and bring in new technologies from the commercial sector. Iterate on those, getting operational feedback, and then spit those out into the major programs of record. We're also looking at kind of that last mile logistic as we think about the Agile Combat Employment, or ACE construct. Looking at retrofitting existing aircraft and heavy lift UASs for AMC for that last mile logistics component. And then finally, we're looking at enabling technologies. I think that's really where the dual use commercial market comes in very well. We recognize, as I mentioned, that industry has a ton of experience developing autonomy, iterating autonomy. You think of the automotive industry. You think of, you have small UAS out there to do other things, data transfer, rail systems, public transit, all those sorts of things all integrate in autonomy. And that's something that we can really harness and leverage in Autonomy Prime. So that's why we have the enabling technologies doing the mission system kind of platform agnostic autonomy risk reduction.
So, I think over the last year or so, you guys have gone and done a lot of incredible things, both Agility Prime and Autonomy Prime, helping to break a lot of barriers and helping to advance this capability with the Air Force, which, still concurrently we have waterfall software programs, right? So not only is it a paradigm in the shift from Secretary Kendall, the way that we think about warfighting, but it's also the way that we think about acquisition and the way that we think about, integrating new programs and integrating new technology. So I guess what are some of the 2 to 3 things that you guys are focusing on, both internally and externally, as far as challenges that Autonomy Prime is looking to help facilitate the betterment towards, which are key enablers of autonomy?
Yeah, so some of those key enablers really, as you mentioned, the business models that I think we're going to have to think of as we want autonomy at scale. We're going to have to start thinking about new business models. Maybe the firm fixed price model, the cost plus models, those sorts of business models and contracting strategies may not work, right? And so one of the things we're exploring is there other options out there through, who knows, right? We're still in kind of the brainstorming aspects of that, but also looking at, some of the things like, for instance, how can we actually transition phase 2 contracts to phase 3 contracts? Can we partner with PEOs to do early risk reduction? As I mentioned, the phase 3 contracts that are the SBIR portfolio companies, AFWERX has brought in over the past 4 years 4,600 contracts, right? So that is a large ecosystem that any PEO that has a technical problem can go and just sole source, because they've already been competitively selected, a contract into a phase 3 production contract without having to do a J&A and arduous, legal reviews for those sorts of things. They can just say, okay, SBIR, this company has a SBIR contract in the past. We were extending or completing the work that was done to that, and we can issue a phase 3 contract right away, right? So I think a perfect example of that is actually, you guys had an open topic that you were competitively selected for and then transitioned over to a phase 3 as an example, right? So those sorts of transition strategies, I think, is something that Autonomy Prime can really help educate the force And as we partner with PEOs and mature that relationship, we can help them answer their kind of technical problems and do early risk reduction for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to AFWERX for the work that they had done over the last couple of years to help bring the SIBR portfolio to a point where it can really be utilized in such an incredible manner that Autonomy Prime and Agility Prime have been able to kind of capitalize on. If you don't mind mentioning how Autonomy Prime and Agility Prime and the Prime organization helps to leverage StratFi TACFi as well. And you had mentioned integrating and talking with some of the PEOs and, as those who have been in the industry there, looking at that as an opportunity, as an open solicitation, know that you have to have those end user customer memorandums. You have to have buy-in from both the requirement side as well as the PEO. So how has Autonomy Prime helped and will, help to focus and leverage that capability as a value add to the PEOs?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. StratFi and TACFi is a very powerful tool for the PEOs. And as they're interested in companies, they can provide matching funds, right? And then the SIBR portfolio comes in and provides amplifying funds to that, so we can really accelerate and not have to, really burden the PEOs as much, who already have a strained budget. So we're able to leverage multiple pots of money to, really accelerate the technologies there. Autonomy Prime is certainly working in that StratFi TACFi process to, accelerate promising technologies and working with the PEOs and the end users and the requirements, MAGCOM requirements offices to submit, requisitions for that.
No, that makes sense. I think a lot of companies are building out new technology, and there's the difference between Kendall's capabilities as well as the acquisition of a new platform. So how do we think about the difference between helping the Air Force achieve a capability versus acquiring a new platform? What are some of the contributing factors there?
Right. So I think you'll notice, like in the OIs, that about half of them are not titled by a platform, right? We talk about moving target engagement. That's not a platform. We talk about space order battle, not a platform. Resilient basing, not a platform. It's a capability, right? And so I think really Secretary Kendall was trying to get after this mindset and shift that we need to start thinking about capabilities instead of platforms. Autonomy is a perfect example of that. When we started Autonomy Prime, we recognized that autonomy was going to be cross-cutting across platforms. I mentioned that earlier. That's not how we're currently aligned in the budget process. We're aligned very platform and centric. And if it helps the F-22, the F-22 budget will pay for this capability, right? If it helps the F-35, the F-35 budget will pay for it. But what happens when a capability is cross-cutting across platforms? One of the things we need to do is to make sure that those capabilities don't fall off the bridge that we've built across the Valley of Death just because they don't fit nicely into a platform. We need to make sure we have a way to acquire that and fund sustainment of those capabilities, right? So,
and I guess that speaks more to the critical role that Autonomy Prime plays as a tech scout and advocate for particular technology that can benefit the Air Force across the myriad of other platforms, because of the way that the budget process works and such. So
yeah, so AFWERX is kind of uniquely suited and situated to be kind of we don't sit nicely under the acquisition authorities. We don't sit nicely under the lab authorities. We kind of sit in the middle, right? And so we're able to have that connective tissue between the PEOs and recognize their problem sets and sit with industry, right? We have a great relationship with industry, great, outreach programs. We're all the big tech events and conferences, getting the message out there. We have great outreach for our SIBR Sitter program. And then we also have that Spark network for operators too. And we have great ability to leverage those. So we really sit kind of in the niche between all of those stakeholders. They're able to connect it, as a tech scouting function. Able to connect the technologies that are developed in the SIBR Sitter and the Prime portfolio, connect those with the users to get operational feedback, and then have them ready for the PEOs when they're ready to have validated requirements.
Absolutely. So we're sitting here towards the end of September. Is there anything, as we are about to go over into a new fiscal year, a lot of new program starts, especially a lot related to autonomy? Is there anything that you're particularly excited to see? Anything that the Air Force is working on in particular that FY24 is going to be really exciting to watch out for?
Yeah, so we'll release kind of the official start of Autonomy Prime. We have a kind of soft start now, working with our, inside our cyber portfolio and leveraging a lot of those contracts. We'll have an official launch towards the end of this year, pending congressional approval as a, budget approval. As we launch, Autonomy Prime, that's what I'm most excited about, because that's where I'm at, right? And so we'll have an ICO, an innovative capabilities offering, released towards the end of the calendar year, beginning of next calendar year. And that will be a great opportunity to bring in some businesses of all sizes, right? Non-traditionals, traditionals, underneath those kind of areas of interest that we publish there. So be on the lookout for that.
Sounds good. Well, Rajan, thank you so much for the time today. It's been a pleasure seeing you again and talking with you. And thank you so much for the time. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Great to have you here for this first of our series talking about aerospace, but stay tuned for further conversations at the intersection of both government and industry and all domain. Thank you.